endangered wild horses are returning to the steppes of Kazakhstan for the first time in 200 years. It's part of an ambitious scheme to return them to their original habitats.
They were declared extinct in the wild, forgotten relics of a vanished ecosystem, but in a bold move that stunned the scientific world.
Yeah, I think that even the best horse trainer, if they tried to use the techniques, some of the more traditional techniques of horse training on them, they'd probably get flattened.
China released a herd of these extinct horses straight into one of its harshest deserts. Experts called it madness. Nature had the final say. What happened next didn't just surprise the locals. It left biologists across the globe scrambling for answers. This is the story of a species reborn and the desert that tried to break them. Forgotten hoofbeats. In 1969, a Mongolian border patrol scanned the horizon and spotted a lone stallion. Dust curled around its hooves before it vanished into the silence of the steppe. No one knew it then, but that fleeting glimpse would become the last confirmed sighting of a wild Przewalskiâ's horse. For decades, the species once woven into the lore of Central Asia simply disappeared, vanished not with a bang, but with a whisper. It wasn't always that way. These rugged animals, known as taki or spirit horses, had roamed the steppes for thousands of years. They were never fully domesticated, never fully tame. But the 19th century changed everything. In 1879, Russian explorer Nikolai Przewalskiâ delivered a skull and hide to the St. Petersburg Academy, turning the ghosts of the plains into scientific specimens. Curiosity soon turned to captivity. By the 1920s, European menageries displayed them like novelties, exotic relics from a dying wilderness. But political upheaval, expanding human settlements, and widespread water drilling across Mongolia and China decimated their habitat. Hunting pushed them further toward extinction. And when the wild population was finally wiped off the map, only a few scattered survivors remained, all behind bars. Here's where things could have ended. Only 12 genetically distinct horses had made it through, 5 stallions and 7 mares. That's it. Barely enough to form a viable gene pool. Some experts suggested freezing their DNA and waiting for cloning technology to catch up. Instead, something remarkable happened. Zoos around the world did something rare in conservation. They worked together. In 1959, the International Stud Book was formed. It wasn't just paperwork. It became a lifeline. No single zoo was allowed to hoard bloodlines. Breeding pairs were carefully planned. Horses were flown across continents for matchups. Slowly, the captive population grew. By 1980, there were more than 1,000 Przewalski horses living in zoos and reserves, still captive, but no longer on the brink. That's when China entered the scene with a bold idea. In 1985, the Ministry of Forestry decided it was time to bring the taki home. They chose a patch of desert in Jimsar County, Xinjiang, 4 square km of scrub and wind. It wasn't lush, but it was wild, and wild was exactly what these horses needed. Over the next 20 years, 24 Przewalski's horses arrived from zoos in the UK, Germany, and the US. They didn't fly first class. They flew in Ilyushin 76 cargo jets, each horse tucked into padded box stalls. During layovers in Novosibirsk, misting units cooled them down with fine sprays of water. Once in Jimsar, the real test began. Quarantine lasted 30 days. Vets screened for every known equine illness. No hand feeding. Keepers scattered native grasses like feathergrass and sacks across the enclosures to train their palates for the desert. They even sprinkled wolf scat around the fence lines, a trick to awaken ancient instincts without the risk of real predators. Behind the scenes, geneticists were watching closely. Thanks to meticulous pairing and new DNA techniques, the herd at Jimsar managed to retain over 95% of known wild genetic diversity, a staggering feat considering their narrow genetic origins. But numbers weren't enough. To truly reclaim their wildness, the horses needed more than safety. They needed freedom. And in 2001, Chinese scientists took a leap no one expected. What happened next shocked even the most seasoned biologists. Building a breathing gene bank. Keeping a horse alive, that simple. toss in hay, water, and a decent fence, but keeping the genetic future of an entire species alive. That's a whole different challenge, especially when every single Przewalski's horse alive today traces back to just 12 ancestors. That's a genetic tightrope walk, and one wrong step could bring it all crashing down. So China didn't just build a breeding center in Jinsar. They built a living, breathing gene bank, one powered not by wires and algorithms, but by hooves, instincts, and very clever design. The blueprint is genius in its simplicity. 4 satellite pastures ring the main facility like a compass rose. In each pasture, one stallion rules a harem of 6 to 8 unrelated mares. But here's the twist. No group stays put for more than a year. Every spring, the entire arrangement shuffles. Adults are sedated, lifted onto flatbeds, and rotated clockwise to the next enclosure. This keeps bloodlines fresh and mimics what would happen in the wild, where young fillies naturally drift away to prevent inbreeding. But it doesn't stop at moving trucks. Behind the scenes, powerful genetic software tracks everything. When a foal is born, a sample from its umbilical cord gets logged into a national DNA database. The system maps genetic markers back to the 1959 International Studbook and uses cloud-based tools to scan for risk potential. Mismatches flagged in red mean trouble, too much genetic overlap. Green means go. The result? A digital dashboard that breeders jokingly call horse Tinder. It even includes glam shots of stallions with windswept manes and scores showing each horse's genetic diversity. The numbers might be amusing, but the mission is serious. Since this tech rolled out in 2015, the inbreeding coefficient across the herd has dropped from 0.125 to under 0.08. That's a 40% reduction in just a few years, a huge win in the world of conservation. Now consider the behavioral side. These horses were born in captivity, safe, protected, but the wild doesn't care about pedigree. So keepers train foals to fear, like their ancestors once did. They wear nondescript coveralls, avoid eye contact, and move silently. Twice a month, leashed and muzzled wolves pace the fence line while trainers observe the horses react, with pounding hearts at first. Then, with every drill, they recover faster. They're learning fast. Of course, all this takes money. Moving a single horse from Europe to Xinjiang costs close to 800,000 yuan, which is more than $100,000. To help raise funds, the project airs short videos, galloping foals, rippling dunes, and soft music. Corporate donors chip in. One dairy giant even puts Przewalski's horse heads on yogurt lids and covers the genome sequencing bills in return. In 2020, 3 stallions arrived from Berlin. As the final insurance documents were signed, project leader Gaoing whispered just 2 words. It's done. They had the numbers, the diversity, the behavioral prep, and within days, 30 juveniles were on their way to the open desert. The gene bank now had lungs, legs, and instincts. Choosing a harsh classroom. If you were releasing a species from extinction, would you pick a place where summer hits 42 degrees Celsius, winter drops below minus 30 degrees, and rainfall barely covers a coffee cup? China did. Scientists chose Kalamali, a brutal stretch of the Hungarian Gobi. Not in spite of its extremes, but because of them. It's dry. It's hot. It's freezing. It barely grows 30 types of grazable plants. And that's exactly why it was chosen. To survive here, a horse can't rely on human help. It has to relearn what it means to be wild. This wasn't a zoo with fences. It was a survival gauntlet. The terrain's toughest teacher is water. In good years, melting snow leaves small puddles scattered across the reserve. But when drought hits, and it often does, those puddles vanish, collapsing into shallow seats barely bigger than a volleyball court. A 2022 camera trap survey found just 42 reliable watering holes spread across 50,000 square kilometers. That's less than 1 per 100 kilometers, far below what most hoofed mammals need. So how did the horses cope? They weren't alone out there. Kalamali already housed around 6,000 kulin, or Mongolian wild asses. They move faster, need less water, and have been desert survivors for generations. Scientists worried about violent clashes over limited drinking spots, but something surprising happened. Infrared footage showed the horses waiting. They let Kulin drink first. This unspoken etiquette wasn't taught in a lab. It emerged on the fly. By yielding space at water points, the horses avoided injuries and found a way to share. For animals that hadn't seen open plains in generations, this was a breakthrough. Then came the wolves. A 2021 drone survey identified 14 gray wolves patrolling the reserve. These weren't zoo predators. These were real, coordinated hunters. And they didn't go after the mares. They targeted bachelor stallions, the loners without herds. Rangers recorded 3 wolf kills in the first winter alone. At first glance, that's brutal. But ecologists saw something deeper. Balance. These weren't isolated attacks. They followed the exact same predation patterns seen in Mongolia's fully wild populations. Even the vegetation offered lessons. Botanists tracked grass plots, and the data flipped assumptions. Areas grazed lightly by horses actually got healthier. Roots grew deeper. Stipa grasses, a staple in the local diet, began to tiller, sending out new shoots that anchored the soil against wind erosion. Meanwhile, places fenced off from grazing started to lose diversity as dominant shrubs took over. In the harshest irony, it turns out these wild horses weren't hurting the desert, they were helping it. But nature has one more card to play. Climate change models suggest that Kalamaiali's productivity, how much life it can support, could drop 15% by 2050 due to rising temperatures and shifting weather patterns. Scientists aren't sitting idle. They're mapping potential altitude corridors along the eastern foothills, slightly cooler, slightly wetter. Horses equipped with new featherweight GPS collars will help blaze these new trails, showing researchers in real time where they can adapt. Because here's the truth. The desert isn't a backdrop. It's a boot camp. The gate swings open. The morning of August 27, 2001, was clear and windless. The kind of stillness that tricks you into thinking nothing important is about to happen. But behind the wire fence at the Kalamaiali Nature Reserve in China's far northwest, history was lined up and breathing. 27 Przewalskiâ's horses minus 11 mares, 9 stallions, and 7 foals stood at the edge of everything they had never known. They had been raised in captivity, cared for with surgical precision. Now it was time to set them loose. Rangers gently funneled the group down a gravel path toward a wire opening. This moment would later be called Release Zero. There were no tranquilizers, no ropes. The halters had been taken off back at base camp. What happened next would be dictated by instinct. The lead stallion stopped at the threshold, ears twitching. He sniffed the air, then charged into the desert. The rest followed, hooves pounding, dust rising. Within seconds, they vanished beyond a low ridge. No one followed. There were no drones tracking their every move, no live feeds or tranquilizer guns on standby. And then, silence. 3 days passed before anyone could locate them again. A rented Gobi-12 turboprop aircraft finally picked up the signal, 60 kilometers southeast of the release site. The horses were clustered near a dry awio. But what caught the scientists' attention wasn't just their location. It was what they had found, an uncharted spring, previously unknown to even the most experienced rangers. GPS data confirmed it. In just 72 hours, these horses had found water in one of the driest, harshest landscapes in Asia. That's when it hit the field teams. This desert now belonged more to the horses than to them. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. As the weeks unfolded, the rewilded horses began to behave exactly like their ancient ancestors. Young stallions drifted off, forming tight-knit bachelor bands. And then 9 weeks after their release, came a critical milestone. Rangers documented the first full-blown stallion challenge. 2 males squared off, ears pinned, nostrils wide, flanks heaving. But instead of a brutal fight, the clash ended with a series of ritual squeals, the kind that marked dominance without injury. It wasn't just a skirmish. It was a signal that natural social structures were returning. The release wasn't a one-off. This was the beginning of a long-term plan. 10 more horses were released in 2004, 18 more in 2008, and another batch of 18 joined in May 2024 at the Dulan Conservation Station. That brought the total number of horses set free in Xinjiang to 146. And they didn't just endure, they flourished. Even during the region's punishing winters, their body condition remained strong. On the Hennick scale, which ranks a horse's fat and muscle from 1 to 9, most hovered at an average of 3.5, better than many domestic horses raised on ranches. Their home range exploded from the original 120 square kilometers to over 660 by 2007. They weren't wandering aimlessly. They were tracking the green-ups, those fleeting patches of new vegetation that come with desert rains, and returning to core watering points by midsummer. Still, no success story comes without setbacks. 2 mares died after ingesting plastic feed bags blown in from a nearby camel encampment. It was a painful reminder that even the best intentions can't shield wildlife from modern waste. The reserve acted fast, banning all disposable sacks within its boundaries. But tragedy wasn't always preventable. One stallion fractured a leg in a gopher hole. Rangers faced a brutal choice: rescue the animal and break the integrity of the project, or let nature run its course. They chose the latter. In true wilderness, there are no emergency vets. The stallion limped on for months before disappearing from the satellite's view. His fate was never confirmed. And yet, this wasn't failure. It was reality. Rewilding means real risk. As word spread, so did curiosity. The reserve introduced a visitor quota, allowing just 400 people per year. Tickets vanished within days. Tourists were driven out in electric buses to a single elevated viewing blind. From there, they scanned the horizon through field scopes. A single foal sighting was enough to hush a group. Even at a distance of 300 meters, the clumsy leaps of a newborn colt were enough to bring out tears and awe in equal measure. The media predictably ran with the headline that they had released a herd of extinct horses into China's desert. But behind the dramatic framing was a foundation of careful planning, ecological modeling, and decades of genetic research. Foal recruitment held at 15%. Harem structures grew more stable year after year. Genetic diversity was preserved thanks to strategic introductions from the Jimsar Breeding Center. Behind the scenes, something remarkable was taking shape, not a zoo in the wild, but a functioning ecosystem. And at the center of it all stood a species once considered lost forever, now writing its next chapter in hoofprints across the sand. Genetic revelations. In 2018, evolutionary biologist Ludovic Orlando and his team dropped a revelation that flipped conservation science on its head. They examined 42 ancient horse genomes and compared them to modern samples from across China, Mongolia, and Europe. What they discovered shocked the field. Przewalskiâ's horses, long thought to be the last truly wild horses on Earth, are actually descended from animals first domesticated by the Votai people of northern Kazakhstan around 5,000 years ago. The headlines went wild. Some media outlets cried foul, claiming it undermined the whole idea of preserving wildness. Conservation funds, they warned, could dry up. But the people on the front lines of this work had a different take. Behavior and ecological value, they argued, matter more than a genetic label. The International Union for Conservation of Nature agreed, keeping the Przewalskiâ's horse on the red list and urging further study rather than retreat. China's scientific community took the baton and ran with it. At the Xinjiang University Genomics Center, researchers began sequencing entire chromosomes from wild horses roaming the Kalamali Nature Reserve. The results were promising. These animals showed a nucleotide diversity score of 0.25, which stacks up well against wild zebras and even outperforms some domestic dog breeds. Even better, the mitochondrial DNA revealed 6 maternal lines. That meant the early breeding programs had avoided a major pitfall: reliance on just 1 or 2 founding mares. Then came a closer look at the immune system. Horses living in desert environments face constant threats from ticks and sandflies. Their defense hinges on a robust set of genes known as the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC. Domestic horses usually carry 8 or fewer NHC alleles, but the Kalamazoo herd, 12. That diversity gives them a better shot at fighting off diseases like pyroplasmosis, a blood parasite that's devastating to less adapted animals. But genetics isn't just about disease resistance. It's also about digestion. In 2022, researchers collected fecal samples from the wild herd and shipped them to Beijing's Institute of Zoology. The team ran full metagenomic analyses and found something fascinating. These horses had unusually high levels of Febribacter and Rominacoccus bacteria, known for breaking down tough, dry grasses. These microbes barely register in domestic Mongolian horses, but they flourish in Przewalskiâ's guts. That might be a key reason these animals are thriving in such harsh terrain. Now Chinese vets track these microbes the way dairy farmers monitor rumen health in cattle. If the balance tips, they know something's wrong before symptoms show. But so far, the experiment is working. What's happening in China's desert shocked biologists all across the globe. But this massive task isn't done yet. Something else is coming, a project so big and ambitious, the whole world is cheering for it. Spreading hooves across China. Once Kalamazoo's herd found its footing, a bigger idea began to take shape. Could wild horses return to more of China's forgotten frontiers? In 2021, conservation planners rolled out an ambitious vision called Project 3 Stars. The goal was bold: create 3 self-sustaining populations of Przewalski's horses, each with at least 150 breeding adults scattered across the country by 2035. The strategy echoed a smart investment plan. Never put all your hope in one basket. If fire, disease, or drought strikes one herd, the others still survive. The first expansion site was Docking Mountain National Nature Reserve in Inner Mongolia, 700 kilometers east of Kalamazoo. It began with 13 pioneers, 4 stallions, 7 mares, and 2 foals. Their journey wasn't taken lightly. Military logistics teams transformed flatbed rail cars into traveling stables, complete with mist fans, padded walls, and onboard video. A veterinarian monitored each heartbeat on a tablet. One stallion's pulse jumped during a bridge crossing, but every horse stepped off calm and steady. Managers waited just 30 days before releasing the group. That gave time to map local water seeps and prep the range. The release drew a mix of park officials and Kazakh herders, soon to become patrol rangers. As the foals trotted into the grasslands, wind turbines spun quietly in the background. Wild heritage and modern technology met in one surreal frame. But Docking isn't just a copy of Kalamazoo. It sits higher, gets more summer rain, and grows taller grasses. GPS collars showed the horses needed to roam less, thanks to better forage density. Winter, however, posed new risks. To get ahead of deep snow, engineers installed 3 simple snow shelter belts using latticewood fencing. These barriers slow drifting flakes and create low-wind hollows where horses can dig through to feed. It's a man-made fix based on how animals normally use rocky outcrops, only none exist here. Next came Gansu's Hexi Corridor, a place steeped in Silk Road history. In 2023, 8 horses made the trip south to this gravel plain filled with sodium-rich saxal shrubs. Biologists believe the minerals can help lactating mares stay healthy. Human traffic nearby raised concerns, especially with a new expressway close to the boundary. But acoustic sensors showed the highway-trimmed stallion vocal range by only 10%, still within safe limits. These transfers are teaching more than just logistics. In Gansu, stallions raised on open plains hesitated in dense shrub patches. Mares led instead, and ecologists noted a more diverse diet in their tracks. That twist could influence future translocations. Sometimes the right trailblazer isn't the strongest, but the smartest, and China is not alone. Mongolia resumed its own reintroductions in the Great Gobi Reserve. Kazakhstan, in a powerful gesture of ecological reconciliation, welcomed its first returning horses in 2024 aboard a Czech military cargo plane, Through formal agreements, China trades surplus foals for data on predators and Kulin migrations, building a regional network of conservation through collaboration. By the end of 2024, China's wild horse populations totaled nearly 400 individuals. That moves them tantalizingly close to the 3 stars milestone. Officials are already eyeing a new site near Qinghai Lake. While confirmation is pending, the momentum is undeniable. What once seemed like a fragile experiment is now a blueprint for success. So what's your take on reintroducing extinct animals into the wild?